This is what happened when Jackie Craig called the police because the neighbor choked her son. The neighbor said that he choked him because he littered. Mrs. Craig said he has no business touching her son, and listen to what the cop had to answer. Listen carefully.
Okay, I got a problem with these people here. Okay. As you see, the comments throwing trash here. Okay. You make all the big fuss out of it. As you speak it, but I want to say this. I'm going to start the comment searching here. Okay. So what's going on with you?
My daughter and son came home saying that this man grabbed him and choked him. I came around here and asked him, I said, why did you put your hands on my son? He said, oh, he threw some paper. I said, and I told him to pick it up. He said my son didn't pick it up. He defined him, so that's why he did it. Instead of following him home, he said, but y'all don't even live here. It doesn't matter where we live. You don't have the right to grab and choke nobody's son.
Okay.
His wife is nobody. So I have a problem with that. My son is 7 years old. You don't have the right to grab him, choke him behind no paper that he threw. What you should have done, because we have been living here for years, so you know that my house is a door in between yours. You could have came to me. Don't put your hands on my son.
Right. Well, why don't you teach your son not to litter?
You heard right. That cop said, why don't you teach your son not to litter?
Why don't you teach your son not to litter?
He can't prove to me that my son littered. But it doesn't matter if he did or didn't. It doesn't give him the right to put his hands on it.
Why not?
Because he don't. It don't. What you mean?
I'm just asking.
Because it don't.
It
don't. He's not his parent. He's not his parent.
Okay. Why?
So
why are you yelling at me?
Because why would you ask me? Why don't I teach him? You don't know what I teach him.
Okay.
And you don't. Your kids don't mean that they go by your rules when they're not in your
sight. Why are you yelling at me?
Because you just pissed me off telling me what I teach my kids and what I don't.
If you keep yelling at me, you're going to piss me off and I'm going to take you to jail.
Okay.
You're under arrest. Get on the ground! Get on the ground now! Get on the ground! You just arrest. You're going to jail. Get on the ground now! On the ground now!
At this point, Jacqueline Craig and two of her daughters were arrested. One for filming. Here's what Jacqueline Craig had to say about it with her lawyer a few days later.
Very distraught because what I felt I was doing was actually protecting my child, and it didn't happen. It made me feel less of a parent that I couldn't protect him when he needed it.
We're often asked what was the most offensive thing about what happened yesterday, and there were so many things. As you watch the video, it gets worse by the minute. When you think you've reached the worst part, it gets worse. But the singular, I believe the singular most offensive thing is that this is a parent who believed that she could call a police officer to the scene to help her in a time of need. And instead of being able to protect her or her child, she was assaulted. Her child, two of her children were arrested and terrorized, and it sent a signal to the 7-year-old who was just assaulted by a neighbor that he could never rely on police officers for protection, because when police were called to protect him, they arrested his mom and his sisters, and that's an attack on this family, but it's an attack on the African American community. I believe that's why you're seeing such a strong reaction, really across the world.
Fast forward to 2024, and this is what happened.
Highway cameras recorded the end of a hit-and-run incident turned shooting Tuesday afternoon, and it involves an off-duty Fort Worth police officer who called 911. Dispatchers learned the officer was in his personal car following a pickup truck, he says, rammed his car.
Complainant is going to be the one following the red Ford F-150.
Fort Worth PD says the off-duty officer told dispatchers the driver in the red Ford F-150 hit him on I-35 West southbound near East Morningside Drive and then drove off. The officer followed the Ford and this happened.
Shots fired at South Freeway and Seminary. Shots fired at the complainant who's following.
Tonight, Fort Worth PD confirmed to WFAA that off-duty officer is Officer William Martin.
We are on live. Don't grab her.
Martin made national headlines after the wrongful December 2016 arrest of Jacqueline Craig, a Fort Worth mother who called 911 for help. Body cam video went viral of Martin forcing Craig and her daughter to the ground in handcuffs. He was suspended 10 days without pay and returned to the force. Craig's family settled with the city of Fort Worth before she died last year. Now, Fort Worth PD says they are investigating this latest incident involving Martin.
Off-duty has discharged his weapon.
Police say Officer Martin fired shots at the driver multiple times Tuesday, who eventually stopped 5 miles down the service road near Bellevue Drive. Paramedics took him to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Off-duty officer William Martin was not injured. In Fort Worth, I'm Scoop Jefferson.
But as you know, there's always two sides to every story.
Emerging from an off-duty police shooting in Fort Worth earlier this month.
Yes, it happened on I-35W between Morningside and Bellevue Drive. That shooting left a man injured and a Fort Worth officer facing charges and on detached duty. But tonight, some are demanding that officer be fired. Here's Meredith Yeomans.
3 days after Fort Worth police officer William Martin's arrest,
Justice was not served.
community leaders called for more action.
Now that they arrested him, we are demanding that this man is fired from his job.
An arrest warrant released today says Martin called 911 to report a collision on I-35W with another driver who was fleeing the scene. It says when both vehicles stopped on the freeway, Martin, who was off duty and in his personal car, got out and fired 3 shots with his handgun, striking the other driver multiple times. It all ended when officers stopped both vehicles on this frontage road.
Even though you was an off-duty officer, you had no right to be shooting.
The arrest warrant says the driver of this red pickup told police he wasn't aware of the collision and thought he was being followed by Martin. But in a sworn statement provided by Martin's attorney over the weekend, Martin says the driver, quote, looked straight at me before the collision, was causing extreme danger to the other drivers, and rammed Martin's silver sedan when they stopped on the freeway, prompting Martin to shoot.
This guy should have been fired.
Yes.
With the Jacqueline Craig situation.
Yes.
This guy should be fired now.
In a statement, Martin's attorney calls his arrest a rush to judgment by a department which he says formed a conclusion as to Officer Martin's guilt, and evidence was either accepted or ignored to fit that conclusion. Meredith Yeomans, NBC5.
So there you have it. Once a bad cop, always a bad cop. He is still employed by the Fort Worth Police Department and is currently on detached duty pending an internal affairs investigation.